We remember when we would draw ships as young children, the one thing we would always obsess over, trying time and time again to perfect, was the anchor. It didn't hurt that Popeye made anchors look so cool. In this video, we're going to talk about how the anchor works and why we think it's the coolest part of the ship. First up, let's talk about how an anchor actually holds a ship. According to shipping experts, the process of anchoring a ship can be pretty basic, but that doesn't negate the fact that hundreds of accidents take place each year because of faulty anchoring. Anyway, what does this process really look like? When the anchor is first dropped into the big blue sea, the crown, or that curved part at the bottom, is the first to hit the seabed. To really secure the position of both the anchor and naturally the ship it's trying to stop, the flukes, or those curved wings that stick out on the left and right of the anchor, take their position, dragging the ship back to a stop by embedding themselves deeply and securely into the sea floor. Interestingly, according to experts, height doesn't matter. That's some good news for all the short kings out there. Rather, regardless of what height the anchor is dropped from, the crown will always touch the bottom first, providing the flukes with the, for lack of a better word, anchor, so that they can dig down into the sandy sea bottom and stabilize the ship. Confused? We were too. But then we pictured it to be something like rocking a baby to sleep, moving back and forth. Next, let's talk about the holding power of the anchor. Can its strength rival that of Thor's? Alright, before we start assembling the Avengers, let's talk about what goes into making the anchor so strong. Because after all, without strength, how would the anchor be able to work and perform effectively? So, according to shipbuilding experts, there are three things that impact the holding power of anchors. First, let's talk about its construction, then we'll move on to the other factors. Let's dive in. The strength and holding power depends on the construction of the anchor. This means that a lot of things go into consideration during the construction of the anchor to ensure that it will function effectively. That means things like the amount of equipment carried by a ship, its size, etc. all work towards the weight of the anchor and the length of its chain. So in a way, size does matter. Along with this, the size of the fluke area determines what the holding power of the anchor will be. There are three rules for holding power, according to the International Association of Classification Societies. We personally think that they could have had a much cooler name, but anyway, holding power is divided into three categories: normal, high, and super high. So what's the deal with super high and high holding power anchors? Well, they actually have less weight because they have a larger fluke design, which means that they can hold more but weigh less. Listen, don't ask us for the physics behind this, we have no clue, but we do know that the larger flukes compensate for the loss of holding power due to the lesser weight, so everything balances out. Next up, let's talk about the nature of the seabed when it comes to impacting holding power. Contrary to how it seems, sand is actually the strongest holding ground, and soft mud, because of how slippery it is the least strong holding ground. An anchor that is embedded in a soft, slippery surface like mud would leave the bottom easily compared to the harder, more gritty surface of sand. What made this easier to understand for us was to imagine the sand like a hairbrush, and the ship like the hair caught between the bristles. It's difficult to pull hair out of a brush, and in a lot of ways, it's difficult for the anchor to slip out of sand. On the other hand, soft mud is like water, and the anchor can easily slip through it. This is why, when considering a place to dock and to anchor the boat steadily, mariners and ship hands always look into the seabed they will potentially be docking in. This helps them determine how likely the possibility of anchor dragging will be. Up next, we look at how the scope of the anchor cable helps an anchor work effectively. As is the case with everything, the correct tools can make all the difference. The same goes for anchoring, because the correct scope is vital for safe anchoring and better holding of the anchor. For us normies, the scope is the ratio of depth of the water to the length of the cable that has been deployed. Basically, the more the scope, the better an anchor will hold the ship. This is because the more scope allows for the angle of chain to sea bottom to be close to minimum. The more the angle, the lesser the holding power, so ship hands always try to ensure that there's as little of an angle as possible. Even though this is getting into the weeds of the situation, we think that it's interesting. Plus, this video is about how a ship's anchor works, so as a general rule of thumb, a scope of 6 is the most advisable and preferred for anchoring, especially when anchoring into the depth of about 20 meters. However, when lowering an anchor in areas with strong wind or current, then the scope should be more than 6, and even up to 10 is considered feasible. But in some cases, a scope of 6 might not be possible, like for one example in a congested anchorage or in a deep water one. Congested anchorages don't have enough room, and in deep water anchorages there isn't enough cable length. There's a lot that ship people need to keep in mind, so it's wild to see all that their job entails. sails. And now let's talk about the process of preparing to anchor. Before an anchor can effectively anchor, there's a lot of prep work that goes into it. In fact, prepping a vessel for anchoring can start days before the ship actually arrives. The process includes the master checking charts for any marked or known anchorages before the ship arrives. So, what's an anchorage area, one might ask? Well, it's an area for the vessel to anchor, duh, but it's also a point that the ship agent mentions in their pre-arrival message, making it easier for shipping authorities to locate the ship on a map of the seas. The anchorage must be checked in the chart to make sure that it's okay for this type of ship. It complies with the company water depth requirements. The depths are less than the maximum depth that the ship is able to anchor in. It has no pollutants or rubbish, so that it's easy for the ship to anchor there. And finally, the nature of the seabed allows for anchoring. Phew, those are a lot of rules. Another important step in preparation is to be aware of the ship's windlass lifting capacity, and most ships in this case are able to lift the weight of an anchor and about 3 shackles above that. Vessels can also anchor in depths which go up to 80 meters, but if the need arises to anchor in depths that are more than that, the windlass capacity for the ship is double checked in order to make sure everything is good to go. And finally, let's look at the 2 ways a ship's anchor can be made to work. Alright, so there are 2 ways to drop an anchor into the sea. One is to embrace your inner Elsa and let it go, and the other is to walk it back. What are these methods? As the name suggests, letting go of an anchor means that the windlass is opened and gravity is allowed to do its magic, pulling the anchor down into the sea. But the thing is, before opening the brake, shipmasters probably should consider the height from which the anchor is being dropped. If not, then the anchor and the ship, depending on things like wind factor, can be damaged. It might not appear as damaged in the short run, but experts have warned the scars will appear before long. Plus, by dropping it into the ocean cold turkey, the anchor will gain momentum as it hits the bottom. This means that the only way it'll actually stop is when it's firmly lodged in the seabed, and in the process of getting there, it might damage the windlass brake because of the speed at which it's falling. Another method is anchoring by walking back, or to lower the anchor with gear. This method means that instead of letting gravity take the anchor for a joyride, the anchor is lowered down with control. The good thing about this is that there's no risk of the anchor being damaged or the windlass being broken because it was dropped from a height. But the problem with this method is that any excessive speed caused by the wind or even mechanically produced will damage both the windlass and the anchor, so you can't win. That's a wrap for this video. What do you think? Will you be volunteering to drop it down the next time you're on a ship? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.